Awesome. Thanks, CJ. Anyone have any other job announcements or anyone looking for a job that wants to come say hi? Everybody. Awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun to start presenting. Here's the part where I say, I'm definitely going to post the slides on my blog tonight, and you go check tonight, and they're not there. And you check tomorrow, and they're not there. Next week, next month. In 3 months, you're going to get tired of waiting. You're going to email me. In 6 months, I'm going to reply and say, no, I'm definitely going to post them on my blog tonight, and I will never post them on my blog. Which is why you can go to robrich.org right now and click on presentations right here. Scroll down to our meetup right here, post-jQuery, and you can pop open the slides that we're going to look at right now. Feel free to get ahead. All of these blue links are links that will click you off into the details about that, which is really cool. So while you're here on my blog, click on About Me, and you'll get to this page, and this talks a little bit about things that I've done. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I'm a friend of Redgate. AZ GiveCamp is really exciting. AZ GiveCamp brings volunteer developers together with charities who otherwise couldn't afford software services. We self-form teams Friday after work. Sunday afternoon, we deliver completed projects. Sleep is optional, caffeine provided. If you're ever in Phoenix, come look us up because AZ GiveCamp is really, really cool. I worked on SQL Server Source Control Basics. That's a lot of fun. Mine is Chapter 8. It's a cool book. I was a core contributor to Gulp in version 2 and version 3. So that's kind of where I cut my teeth in JavaScript, which is pretty fun. Some of the user groups that I'm familiar with, associated with, I help with the Phoenix Angular meetup and also the Southeast Valley.NET user group. I said Southeast Valley.NET user group earlier, and somebody said, is that by Hollywood? Southeast Valley in Phoenix. It's actually in Chandler, Arizona. So that's pretty cool. Woohoo! So one of the things I'm particularly proud of is I replied to an episode of the .NET Rocks podcast. They read my comment on the air. They sent me a mug. Woohoo! I got a mug. So enough about me. Let's talk about jQuery. So we talked about this guy. jQuery. jQuery, the write more, do less JavaScript library. jQuery was invented in a time when the web was really hard to use. And jQuery was great in paving over the differences between browsers, making JavaScript much more approachable. And it was great in its day. So jQuery came out in January 2006. And I grant that some of us learned it yesterday, but it started in January 2006. So in January 2006, the browsers of choice were Internet Explorer 7, Netscape 8, Firefox 2. We're up to like Firefox 50 something, right? Safari 2. Those were kind of the browsers of the day. Does anyone still support IE 7? This is the era that jQuery was built for. So what else happened in 2006? Well, YouTube is 1 year old. Yelp is 2 years old. MySpace is 3. Awesome. Way to go, MySpace. Some other websites that were really popular in 2006. Apparently, Shockwave games were all the rage. TailRank.com was a great news aggregator. Deadspin.com was a great sports. Has anyone ever heard of any of these? Zipcar. Yeah, I think I've heard of Shockwave. Yeah, this was 2006. So the state of the web in 2006. We had this really inconsistent browser experience. Each browser implemented the DOM differently. JavaScript, the engine, was cloned in great detail and very carefully, and all of the JavaScript engines were very consistent across the browsers. But the DOM, the way that we interacted with the page, was very, very different. So JavaScript was hard. Well, JavaScript wasn't hard. The DOM was hard. But JavaScript was hard. And so what jQuery brought us was this really elegant, simple paradigm of how to deal with JavaScript in the browser. It paved over all of these browser inconsistencies, and it gave us a really, really simple experience to be able to target any browser, which is wonderful. That's a great and noble goal. It did a great job. It's on 90 some odd % of the websites, and now we've gotten to that point where it did a great job and browsers have caught up. Well, 2006, what's the state of the web today? Today, we have evergreen browsers. We have HTML5, which arguably now is more of a marketing term than a technical term. But it's really hard to not upgrade Chrome when you restart it. It's really hard to not have the latest version of Firefox or Safari or Edge. In all of the places where we use browsers, as soon as they finish inventing the thing, within the next 6 weeks, we're going to have that on every browser that we're working with. Yeah. Safari for Windows is dead. IE 4.5 for Mac was awesome and painful. Yeah, Safari is the new IE6, so that'll be kind of interesting. But these browsers update automatically. HTML is now a living standard, and so all of these features come in automatically. JavaScript is a living standard, and so we move forward. We can take advantage of the features that come today almost universally across every browser experience. So here's my pitch. jQuery was great, but jQuery is old. The web is different now. jQuery solved the problem that we had yesterday. The problem that we have today is different. Probably we have muscle memory built up where we're like, I need to solve a problem. I need to, let me just pull in jQuery and let me do $.paren, and now we're into jQuery land. That's interesting, but we probably don't need jQuery just to be able to grab $openparen. Probably we can do these things with native browser tools. Any questions so far? I'm totally going to make VJ dizzy. This is going to be fun. OK, so let's dig into what is jQuery. jQuery is, for the most part, these 4 main functional groups. We have AJAX, DOM manipulation, event handling, and animation. Are there any things that you do with jQuery that aren't these 4? Yeah, I printed out on toilet paper and I use it. No, I'm just kidding. AJAX, DOM manipulation, event handling, and animation. It made these really easy for us back in 2006, and it gave us a really elegant experience on these 4 topics. Today, all of these are much easier in other places. Let's look at each one. AJAX. Can we build it? Well, with anything that we look at here, there's that obvious argument of build versus buy. Should I pull in jQuery? Should I write my own? Should I pull in a different library? I love this micro.js site because it's all kinds of really, really tiny libraries to do interesting things. jQuery is 2 megs, gzipped and compressed. So competing with 2 megs, let's look for an AJAX library and see if we can get something smaller than 2 megs. 1.8K, 4.2K, 3.5K, 0.6K. One of the things that makes jQuery wonderful is it's that great user experience. One of the things that makes it painful is it's 2 megs. That's big. So you might want to just cruise through looking for the feature that you want here on microjs.com. Go grab the micro library, pull in that library, and you might get to that goal a lot sooner. So as you grab these slides later, click on microjs.com and you'll get straight there. So AJAX. AJAX is built on top of XML HTTP request. That's kind of the object that makes this happen. And XML HTTP request now is built into every browser. Let's pull up Can I Use? And let's talk about XML HTTP request. Can I Use is a great site that will highlight the particular feature and what browser versions it's supported in. So along the main line is the current version of that particular browser. And if there are older versions or newer versions that are also released, canary versions or beta builds, then they'll be listed here too. So I can just kind of walk across this chart and I can see, oh yeah, XML HTTP request is supported everywhere, except for Opera Mini. Does anyone use Opera Mini? So it'll even show IE 11. That's the last version supported by Microsoft. And so you can see, all of the things. XML HTTP request is supported everywhere. XML HTTP request is great. And XML HTTP request actually has a library that, a newer API called fetch. And fetch is promise-based. And fetch is also built into all the browsers. If you're supporting IE 11, there's a quick polyfill that'll give you a fetch API that just falls back to XML HTTP request and makes that happen, which is really elegant. So XML HTTP request is baked in. Back in the day, we used to need to try and figure out if XML HTTP request was defined. And if it wasn't defined, we had to go instantiate the ActiveX control that was XML HTTP request 2. And maybe sometimes that wasn't defined, so we had to look at XML HTTP request 4. And we don't need to do that. XML HTTP request is now baked in. We don't need to do all of that gyration to get to it. So XML HTTP request, the AJAX library that we can pull off now fits on a slide. And it's hard to kind of digest all of this code at once, but it fits on a slide. I pass in the method, I pass in the URL, I might pass in a post data, and I pass in a callback. It's going to go create a new XML HTTP request, pass in that URL and method. It may post data. I'm making the assumption here that it's JSON data that I'm sending off. And so I'm also setting the JSON accept and content type headers. Then once I'm done, if I'm at ready state 4, whatever that means, and I've succeeded, then I'm going to call the callback with my response text. If all you're doing is reaching for jQuery, so you can do $.ajax, do this. What's really interesting is I have this AJAX method, and I'll just pull this into Visual Studio Code. If I want to, for example, add my authentication header, I can just customize that to add my authorization details. Because this code now sits in my library instead of jQuery's, I don't have to figure out how to hack into their API to add additional headers. I may want to add additional error handling here. That's not a great API surface, but we understand. Now I can reach into this and do all kinds of interesting things to make that work for my business logic. I now have control over the AJAX function. Any questions on AJAX so far? Yep.
What about the JSON prefix or JSON library is also built in?
This JSON library? Yes. Let's go back to caniuse.com and let's ask for JSON. There's JSON. It is built into every library everywhere. We used to pull in JSON 2 just in case. We don't need to do that anymore. That was a great question. Thank you.
So that's just straight JavaScript?
This is just straight JavaScript. Yes.
JS file and run it?
Yep. Stick it in a JS file and run it. Stick it in Chrome Developer Tools. Stick it in Chrome Developer Tools right here. And you can run it that way too. I'm not actually going to run it because that would be kind of interesting, but yeah, exactly. It's just JavaScript.
So you can like tweak that a bit to post a record, get a status 201.
Exactly. What if I want to consider not just 200 a success, but anything less than 400 to be a success? Oh, that's not code I can type in. Anything less than 400 is success. So 201, 301, 302. Ideally, the XML HTTP request has already resolved the 201s and the 301s and the 302s. But yes, I can reach into all kinds of interesting things and do interesting logic there. I control this code. Yeah, stick it in your utility library somewhere, and you're all set. So AJAX, we've kind of solved AJAX. Let's talk about DOM manipulation. Well, the first part of DOM manipulation is DOM selection. And we can pull up can I use again and look at document.getElementById and see that that's been in the native browser spec for quite some time. All HTML5 browsers support document.getElementById. And what's really cool, jQuery kind of invented this of passing in CSS selectors into a selection engine to be able to get the results there too. We now have document.querySelectorAll where we can do exactly that. I can do really funky CSS selectors. I can pass them to document.querySelectorAll and it will return to me an array of matching DOM elements. So if you're reaching for jQuery just so you can select stuff, just use document.querySelectorAll. So one could do something like this. var $ equals document.querySelectorAll. Now I can do stuff like that. Does that look familiar? Does that look familiar? Document.querySelectorAll and document.getElementById are baked into the browser, and we can leverage them. We no longer need to reach for jQuery just to pick things. So when we're doing this, we're not just picking things, but we're also modifying things. We really like addClass and removeClass. That's one of the ones that I reach for all the time. We have .class list on all the things. In addition to class name, which is that full string, we have class list, which is an array of those things. So now I can add and remove into this array in the way that I would add and remove any other array. So I just add some class over the top of this thing, and it just concatenates that to the list, not duplicating it if it already exists. I can do the same thing to remove it, and it will remove it out of that list, sticking it back on that DOM element. We always go for that .text method and that .html method, which is really cool. We have inner HTML and text content that can do exactly that as well. And it's just a property, so we can go grab the content out of an element, or we can set the content into an element to be able to manipulate the HTML and the text in this way. Any questions so far about DOM manipulation? Yep.
What has changed in the browser to offer this?
What has changed in the browser to make this happen? This was, the focus of this was HTML5. When they said HTML5 is a thing, they said all browsers must have these minimum features. And going forward, HTML has kind of become this living standard, and so browsers are kind of pushing that edge. But any browser that was HTML5 compliant had these. All of them are, and therefore we have it in all the browsers now. That was a great question. Yep.
So it's all standardized now? There's not a trick word for Edge versus Firefox? It's all inner HTML or text content?
Yes, all of these property names are the same in every browser. Where we used to have some that used this name and some that use that name, they've all standardized now. There's now a HTML consortium that also validates this, and as proposals come into place, they have various levels of these proposals getting accepted that give us validation in one browser or validation in two browsers or a complete set across all of them. Yep.
What about the other jQuery method, like select the closest, the sibling, and also previous, next, all those kind of handy utility, not utility, but the other methods for dominant manipulation?
That is a great question. What about all of those other methods, sibling and closest and next and previous? This site is youmightnotneedjQuery.com. And I love this site because you start out by picking your Internet Explorer version. I wish there was a none button here, because I'm like, totally don't care. But then given an Internet Explorer version, which is the oldest browser, I can now flip through this and I can look for the thing that I want to do. So closest, sibling. So in jQuery we say .next. The next element sibling is that thing that we can use in every browser. So I can go for, is pretty nice. That's cool. Is this class? We can do this matches function, which is pretty cool. Usually when I'm reaching for a jQuery function and I'm like, but I just need this jQuery thing to work, I'll pull up youmightnotneedjQuery.com and I'll search for that JavaScript, that jQuery function, and I'll go find the JavaScript that makes that happen. I really love this site. Any other questions here? Yep.
I have one regarding when you're adding the inner text in there. I thought there was a bit of a security issue where people could start inserting script tags into your values, and so we were told to use .text. With both of those being the equivalent to the value, is there a way to get around that with the new, without using jQuery?
That is a great question. So I have something like this. And that's the script that I have. Now that's great. Shame on the guy who typed that, but still. This is a cross-site scripting attack. I'm trying to get this into the DOM so that I can do something. And I'm probably not going to just alert. I'm probably going to, I don't know, swipe your session cookie or post data to your bank on your behalf and transfer all your money off, or log into you as Facebook and post some interesting post to all your friends. So I have this string that is supposed to do malicious stuff. So I could do something like this. String template equals, I want to say div class equals make it pretty plus some string plus end div. And so my goal here is to, add that text together with my other stuff, and that becomes my template, and I'm now going to show this, and now my UI looks awesome. If my string said, hello, Bob, because my string doesn't say hello, Bob, because my string says go execute this JavaScript, what I'm going to do when I say var div equals document.get element by ID, my div. So I'm going to go grab that div, and I'm going to say div.innerHTML equals template. Now what happened? Boom! I want to not do that. I want to say, make this not execute that JavaScript. I don't want it to treat it like markup. I want it to treat it like text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm not going to get my div. I'm going to go get the make it pretty ID. So I'm going to presume that this is already in my page somewhere. I may need to show it, that's okay, but that markup is already in my page. And so because of that, I'm not going to use template anymore. And I'm going to say, because I'm using the text property, then the browser will correctly HTML encode that, and now I'll just have a bunch of angle brackets on my page where that hello name piece used to be. I've chosen to use this as text to guard myself against that cross-site scripting attack. jQuery makes it something like this to say, here's a function that may take in some stuff. And basically what they're doing is they're saying, that. We just built a text method in jQuery. That's cool. Maybe I need that text method. Maybe I can just call inner text directly. Now they're also going to do something like this. So that I can do, get the text back out if I don't pass it in. You might not need jQuery. That was a great question. What other questions do you have right here?
Inner text on so pre-div inner text. It's assigning some string to it. How do we get what the text is at that point? Like, whereas jQuery right there, it returns it.
Great question. How do I get the text back out? I just read the property. Yeah. Your teacher's going to be so mad at me tomorrow. Sorry. Okay. So we've gotten content, we've manipulated it, we've added classes and removed classes. Yep, go ahead.
What's the difference between the inner text versus the text content?
What's the difference between inner text and text content? Somebody did a typo and should have used this property everywhere. Shame on that guy. Good thing that we have a peer review. Thank you. It's not called inner text. It's called text content. Good catch.
Text content or context?
Text content. I think. Let me go ask, can I use? Yep, text content.
Probably why text is a better one.
Yes, text is definitely a gentler method to get into this. Text content. Yeah, inner HTML and text content. It's like, can you, at the very least, capitalize it consistently? Yeah, either do uppercase or camel case, or do we do dashes or do we not do dashes? Or we can go like this, and we can do both of them.
Oh gosh.
Yes, because standards are awesome.
And I love how it has XML in the name, because you would never want to do an HTTP request if it wasn't for XML, right?
Oh, of course. Why is it XML instead of just HTTP request? Well, because when Microsoft put together the thing to make Outlook Web Access, the HTML part of the thing had already been code frozen, but the XML part wasn't. So if they called it XML HTTP request, then they could get it into the browser. Yeah. Oops. Okay, so we've changed the content. And so we could, for example, start looking at something like this. And we already coded this, which was really interesting. If we just set document.querySelectorAll to $, and then we can do something like $.goGrabTheThing, and then go loop through each of these doing interesting things. Let's add a class, let's remove a class, let's set some text content into each one. We're starting to do that same thing that we do with jQuery.each. Instead of jQuery, we have an actual array, and we just for each through that array. So the next thing that we want to do is we like that click event. $.paren.click. Well, it turns out there's this browser event called addEventListener where we can pass in the thing that we want to listen to, like click. And so we can go do exactly what we wanted to do before. So we really like that click methodology. Let's build a click function. And I'm going to take in an element and a function. Element dot add event listener. I just built myself a click function. Well, let's do that. So I have this click function, and it's just going to take in some element and some function and wire up the click event handler. And so now it's not quite the same experience as jQuery because I'm passing in that getElementById result, that actual element, but I'm getting that same kind of jQuery-ish kind of feel without that 2 meg download. So I've got the events, and that's interesting, but I really like this. I really like how jQuery binds this in an interesting way, and I really want this, as opposed to the other thises. So I like this. So the way we accomplish this in jQuery, in JavaScript, is we call function.bind and pass in to bind what this should be. So the only difference then in my click event handler is I create this click function and I pass in function.bind element. And now the element is this. And now I can do this.id and this.attr and all of those interesting things, this.className. Rather than just taking the function, we're calling function.bind to set this correctly. So let's go rebuild jQuery. We've kind of got enough of these tools that we could do interesting things and try to see if those 5 or 8 features that we definitely reach for jQuery for because it kind of makes sense for us. Let's see if we can do those. Well, we really like that document.querySelectorAll, setting that to the $. And then we like that click event handler, so I'm just going to stick that click onto that $sign as well. So I go stick this in the top of my utility class. And then I'll say, hey, let me go grab the things. Results.forEach. Item. And now I want to do item.click, but that's not the way I built this. I want to say click, item, and now I'm doing the content that I just wired up a click event handler. I selected all the things, and that feels very jQuery-ish. I could do a similar thing. If I only want one, I can say go grab the thing. I only want one result. And I'm going to wire that up into my click event handler. Not quite jQuery, but really close. And the code to pull that off was 4 lines compared to 2 megs. That's interesting. So the next step is we may want to stick on that AJAX function. So I'm just going to take that $.ajax and I'm going to assign it to that function that we built. Method URL data callback. Now I kind of like that I take in an arguments instead. So I'm going to take this AJAX function and I'm going to stick it in our library. And I'm going to say instead of just calling it method URL data and callback, I'll just take in args. And so args.url, args.method, and I may say, and if you don't pass it in, it's get. Args.body. And then this is args.success. So now we've got AJAX in our library. Any questions so far? But I really want it to be this dollar dot and then go click and do the things. Okay, so let's take it to the next level. So here's that function that will take in a selection. And we're going to go wire up some cool events to this selection so that jQuery can do some things automagically. So let's go first grab our matches. And we'll do the for each around those matches. And we'll say for each thing, let's wire up an on method. Let's wire up a click method, an addClass method or remove class method. Here we've got the text and HTML method. And so ultimately what we're returning down here at the bottom is this array of all of the things that are wired up to do all of this stuff. And in our application, if we also need on blur and on focus, then we can rig up focus and blur events. Or the interesting thing with this on event is it's just going to get passed in whatever event you want it to. So you could use on click and then wire up click event handlers that way. If all you need is that much, that's jQuery. And it has an identical look and feel. Here's our AJAX library, and we did all of the things that we, just sticking it on $.ajax. And we've kind of built up this AJAX clone. Any questions so far? Yep.
Why don't they just condense their library?
Why don't they just condense their library? Good call.
Well, it supports really old browsers, and we wouldn't want to change it when they break.
Yes, exactly. It supports really, really old browsers. jQuery 1 supports IE6. And if ever they stop supporting IE6, that would be a breaking change. jQuery 2 drops support for IE6, but supports IE8. jQuery 3, hopefully they'll take it a bit farther. I hear they're speccing out jQuery 4. Maybe they'll move more modern and drop support for all things. And at that point, maybe it could be as simple as the library we built here. Right now, it's still 2 megs, though, and that's after getting rid of IE6. So, they've got a ways. Yep.
Then the question is when you build your application, how do you determine what browser, what's the cutoff line for the browser support? Whether you go back all the way to IE8 or IE6 so that affect your decision whether you use jQuery or not?
Good call. How do I know what browsers I need to support? And because of those browsers, how do I know what features I can use? Ideally, you look to something like Google Analytics or a similar platform where it can tell you the browsers of your users. And based on those browser selections, you know that, hey, if we stop supporting IE6, we're going to lose 0.5% of our users. 0.5% of our users relates to this much of our sales, and so we're going to lose $20,000 in sales next year if we stop supporting IE6. Maybe our business can handle that, maybe it can't. Maybe we look at the analytics and we go, 0.02% of our users use IE6. If we stop supporting IE6, we will lose $20. What's our development costs in supporting IE6? Well, it's definitely more than $20. It's probably more than $20,000. Let's stop supporting IE6. Google Analytics is great because Google Analytics very specifically targets your market in a really elegant way. If you want kind of more broad versions, let me see if I can find it in 28 seconds or less. Can I Use has a really interesting table of usage statistics, and this is them harvesting usage statistics across the world. And there are interesting NPM packages that are based on this Can I Use that will pull in interesting things. And I'm completely, browser list, there we go. So I can say inside browser list, I would like to support the last one version and browsers that are more than 1% of the global market. And that will cap that off at that version. And so I can do some really interesting things there. Browser list is cool. And there's another site that lets me explore what browsers relate to this that the name has escaped me. I'm going to remember it on the way home today, though. So ultimately, what browsers can I support? Ideally, that's less of a technical decision and more of a business decision. Let's look at our market share and the impact to our customer base if we stop supporting that browser. So if I stop supporting the browser, what features can I use now, or what features do I need to not use? And that's where we go look at Can I Use. We've been using var today, which is ES5. Can I use let and const yet? Yep. Well, how about fetch? Can I use fetch? And so I'll do exactly this. I'll come poke into all of these as I find a new API that I like. I'll come to Can I Use, and I'll plug that feature in, and I'll say, so based on my usage statistics and what browsers that I think that I'll support, can I use this feature yet? Can I use SVN? SVG? Yep. Can I use canvas? Can I use for each? Can I use array.sort? Come ask Can I Use, and that will help you make that determination. What other questions do you have so far?
I think you're doing a pretty good job explaining it.
Awesome. So jQuery is four things. jQuery is DOM manipulation. jQuery is AJAX. jQuery is and animation. And we haven't talked about animation yet. What's up with animation post jQuery? I have this show and this hide thing going, and I have this open, and it's a nice fade, and animation. Animation is cool. Back in 2006, when we wanted to do this, the way we did this is we set up a timer. And we said, OK, every 100 milliseconds, move it a little bit more. 100 milliseconds more, move it. Well, now it's a little bit jaggy. Well, how about every 10 milliseconds? Ooh, I'll make it really smooth. How about every 1 millisecond? Well, how does that relate to my screen's refresh rate? Well, it doesn't. So am I calculating frames that the browser is just ignoring? Or am I not calculating enough frames and now my animation looks choppy? So now we have a new API that is request animation frame. And this is baked into all browsers as well. Let's go check can I use because, it's a thing. So request animation frame is even in IE 11, which is wonderful. Whenever the browser is ready to display another frame, it will call request animation frame. I'll do my calculation, I'll be able to show it what happened, and at that point, now it's showing the animation as fast as I can possibly see it. jQuery doesn't use request animation frame under the hood. jQuery 3 may, but for backwards compatibility, it couldn't. If I want to do animation and I want to make it performant, request animation frame is definitely the way to go. And so we should move away from using jQuery for those types of things and use request animation frame. Well, I really like show and hide. Well, here's a CSS class that gives me show and hide. And it just happens to have a transition. So I've got CSS3 animations here, which is really cool, keyframe animation. So I just add the show class, and I remove the hide class, and I get that fade in effect. That's cool. If you just want to hide, hide is just setting the style.display to none. Show is removing the none, and it goes back to wherever you need it to be. So you could set it to block, you could set it to inline block, and that will show it. So if you want to take animation a bit farther, probably you want to look for a framework. GreenSock and animate.css are great CSS animation libraries that will give you access to really rich JavaScript APIs as well, where I can say, kick off this CSS animation, and when it finishes, call my callback. Or let me interrupt it. Or let me do interesting things. Both of them are great APIs. They definitely have a very different API surface than jQuery, but they'll give you modern, really smooth animations. Ultimately, as we look towards these animation things, we're also looking towards other frameworks, and we'll land on something like this: Angular, React, Vue, or Aurelia. We're probably fighting over React and Vue right now. Angular 6 is definitely a thing, and Aurelia is really awesome. They really embrace web standards and really try to get the framework to fade away from you, which is wonderful. If you're leveraging one of these component libraries, you probably have an animation system built into that as well. You probably also have a text templating engine, and so you don't need to do that, raw inner HTML and text content thing. As you're leveraging these libraries, you may also have an AJAX library. Angular has very specifically leaned on RxJS for this. React has one built in, and Vue has one built in. Aurelia says, hey, there's this thing in browsers called fetch. Go fetch. And so that's really cool too. As you're moving in this direction, these libraries probably will have a lot more interesting things for you. Yep.
Probably off the topic question, but just want to get your high-level opinion on Angular versus all those framework. If you're going to build a project, which one would you choose and why?
Good question. So we have some JavaScript frameworks here. Which one is the best? What size is the perfect coffee mug? Each of these libraries has different preferences, different opinions, different strengths and weaknesses. And I would invite you to try out many of them and find which one best matches your needs and your skills and best matches the problem that you have. If you don't have the problem that Angular solves, don't use Angular. If you don't have the problem that React solves, don't use React. Ultimately, compare Angular and React and Vue and get comfortable with the one that you like the best. Or walk into your team and say Angular, Vue, and React, and somebody's going to talk to you for an hour and a half about why that's exactly their favorite tool. And I agree, for your team, that one is the perfect choice. What is the best framework? The best framework is the one that makes you happy, the one that makes you productive. My best framework may or may not be your best framework, and that's okay. Does that unanswer your question?
Very well answered.
What other questions do you have so far? Yep. Promises, good question. Can I use promises? Can I use promise? Yes, I can. Into all evergreen browsers, promises are built in. What's really cool is promises then become the foundation for things like service workers and the fetch API. And so anything that supports fetch API and service workers, which by the way is all of them, will support promises as well. So how about async and await? All of them. You can use async and await in production on your real site today. Unless you're selling to those guys in China that use XP with Internet Explorer 8.
That's not a joke.
Yep. I wish I was kidding.
I did this one e-commerce site that sold to contractors
Mm-hmm.
that did tile tools, and half the customers were on WinXP.
Yes.
I'm talking like a year ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do some really cool things in niche markets where they have very specific and eclectic browser habits. I've been dissing on Opera Mini a little bit, but in some markets, Opera Mini is perfect. Because what Opera Mini does is it downloads the content to their servers, minifies it, and then sends it to your browser. That can be wonderful if you have a 2G connection and you pump your own water. The next billion users may use Opera Mini. And if that's the market that you're catering for, exactly, go after Opera Mini. And understand both the costs of development involved and also the benefits to your business. If you're building a platform as a service, a modern cloud app, probably that's less important. What other questions do you have so far? Yep. That's kind of an interesting rule of thumb. I like that. If the project lasts more than a few weeks, then jQuery may not be a great choice, and maybe you want to lean on one of these frameworks. I like that. Where's that magic cutoff? I look at the durability of the project. Is the goal to deliver fast and throw it away in a week? A really quick marketing site, or is the goal for this application to sit in an enterprise for a few years? What's the skill level of the team that I'm working on? Also, what's the complexity of the thing? Do I just need that submit button to work? Or do I need to do a whole lot of animation around making that submit button turn into this animation and reload the page in interesting ways? And ultimately, you'll get a feel for this. And you'll go, this was hard. Let's find an easier way to do that. Let's lean on one of these frameworks that'll do a lot of that for us. Or, wow, we have a lot of frameworks involved. Let's see if we can simplify it by removing some of these frameworks. Did that unanswer your question? Yeah. That's cool. Complexity is kind of an interesting thing to poke at there. So we've got, yep, go ahead. Good question. So this guy told us to get rid of jQuery. When is this a bad idea? When do I not want to do that thing? Well, if I've got a site that it has, 5 or 8, 10 years of labor built into building this, and it's built on jQuery, you probably don't want to spend 5 or 8 or 10 years rebuilding that without jQuery. If your base framework depends on jQuery, then probably you don't want to rip out jQuery. AngularJS, Angular 1, depends on jQuery. Bootstrap 3 depends on jQuery. Underscore depends on jQuery. But Angular 2 does not. Angular 6 doesn't. Bootstrap 4 doesn't. Underscore, unfortunately, is no longer a thing. So as you kind of upgrade your stack, then you can probably get away from these. What is underscore?
No, why is underscore? Did you say underscore is not a thing?
Underscore isn't one of the popular frameworks right now. Underscore was great in getting us past jQuery's nested wing into kind of a more frameworky approach. And then Angular came out and underscore kind of fell off as a framework. If I've got a modern thing with Bootstrap 4 and Angular material, I probably don't need jQuery. So if we're in a highly regulated environment and our code base is a little bit crusty, probably removing jQuery isn't a good option as well. There are some industries where it's like, we need to ship exactly this stuff. We need very specific validation of our application. We need to be able to prove that it works in all the ways. So the moment that you touch that thing is the moment that we have to retest everything. Don't rip jQuery out of that. But the new content that you build today, you might be able to get away with just a helper library. Maybe $ isn't the variable that you craft for it. Or a few of these little helper methods like click and text and those types of things might make your life a little bit easier, and you're moving in the right direction to get to a more modern stack. If you're focusing on the WordPress type of thing, like I just need a marketing site and your WordPress template uses jQuery, yeah, it's probably not a good idea to rip out jQuery out of your template. Maybe it makes sense, but probably it doesn't. Look towards that cost-benefit analysis. How much time is involved in yanking jQuery out of my project versus how much revenue will I gain from doing so? If SEO is really the killer feature of your business and you really want to rank high in Google, having really fast page load times and really light pages will definitely help you. And so maybe removing jQuery will really help. Maybe you'll get that much cost savings by telling the boss that that hero image in the top left corner that's 5 megs, optimizing that image to be 500K or 50K might gain you that much SEO benefit as well. That was a great question, thanks. What other questions do we have so far? So jQuery was really elegant in solving our problems in 2006. Today's browsers are different, and we might not need jQuery. We looked at, you might not need jQuery.com already. That's the site where I pick the IE version and I can scroll down to the features. I'll frequently use that site to go say, but my muscle memory is doing this. What's the regular JavaScript way to do that? Which one is my favorite?
Yeah, I couldn't hold back.
Yeah.
Which one do you like working with?
Yes, I do like working with them. And that's definitely my framework of choice. Ultimately, I walk down through a couple of things as I'm looking at which framework I want to choose. I look at what are the cultural implications in my business. Some people are like, I definitely won't use Microsoft, or I must use Microsoft. I'll look at the team that may take over for me. And what skills do they have? Do they have more skills in this particular framework or that particular framework? I'll look at what are the problems that I'm trying to solve and which tools best match those problems. And then if all else is equal in all of those, then my preferences start to take choice. But ultimately, usually, I'll hit one of these business or technical answers before the preference piece comes into play. We have a .NET shop, and so we're going to use .NET. Or we have an Angular shop, and we really like TypeScript. OK, let's build this in Angular. Or if I'm given a problem where it's like, just solve this business problem, Now I can go look at all the things and I can pick, and that's really fun too. Which one's my favorite? The one that accomplishes the job that delivers value to my customers the fastest. So, this is kind of an interesting meme in that direction. What if drivers were hired like programmers? I love this blog post. That's really cool. Job requirements: professional skills in driving normal and heavy freight cars, buses and trucks, trolley buses, trains, subways, tractors, shovel diggers, contemporary light and heavy tanks, currently in use by NATO countries. Skills in rally and extreme driving are obligatory. Formula One driving experience is a plus. Knowledge and experience in repairing of piston and rotor Wankel engines, automatic and manual transmissions, ignition systems, board computers, ABS, ABD, GPS, and car audio systems by world-known manufacturers obligatory. Experience with car painting and tinsmithing tasks is a plus. The applicants must have certifications by BMW, General Motors, and Bosch, but not older than 2 years. Compensation $15 to $20 an hour, depending on the interview result. Which basically is every job posting everywhere. Yeah. Education requirements: bachelor's degree of engineering at $20 an hour. So that is my pitch. If the only reason that you are reaching for jQuery is because it was familiar, you might do better and you can save yourself the 2 meg download. Ultimately, look to the framework that makes you happy and really enjoy coding. This is a lot of fun to do. Thanks for coming, everybody.